I guess the first question I would ask is, why are you prolonging your suffering? Why are you prolonging your suffering? Isn't it interesting? I'm going to give an analogy here. I was in the franchise system for 6 years, and I was doing so well that the franchise owner would hire me to train new franchises. And so people would come over from all over the country, come to Chicago, and I would show them how I was running my system. I was absolutely shocked at how many people paid all this money to buy a franchise system, flew to Chicago to spend the week with me, and then spent the week telling me how they were going to do it differently and how the franchise was wrong. You can run your business however you want, but why? Why would you buy the franchise system if you weren't going to believe it? If this many people are telling you that this is not just a key, but the key, not just a key, not just a way, but the way, why are you prolonging your suffering? None of us are saying this is the exact way you have to do it. My morning routine has iterated tremendously, depending on what I've got going on, depending on what I've learned. So nobody's telling you it only works this one perfect way. You got to make it right for you. But every single person is saying it has to happen in some way. So why are you prolonging your suffering?
This is the Entrepreneurs United podcast with your hosts, John St. Pierre and Rich Hoffman.
Hey, welcome back, entrepreneurs and intrapreneurs. Today we're sitting down with Erin Marcus. She's the CEO and founder of Conquer Your Business, and she really helps operators move from operators to business owners. That's what I should say first, right? When you're trying to conquer your business, are you in charge of your business? Do you take action and get results? And that's what Erin helps entrepreneurs work on. Erin, thanks for being with us today.
I'm excited. Thank you for having me. Good seeing you again.
Yeah, I had an opportunity to be on your podcast, the Ready Yet podcast, and I loved our conversation. I couldn't wait to get you on to talk to our entrepreneurs. If you had one message for entrepreneurs that you work with constantly over and over again, what is that message?
So this has been a driving force for me even before my entrepreneurial journey. This is a driving force that I learned when I worked in the world of families with aging parents. This is what I find in retrospect was my driving force when I was an intrapreneur, because I realized that's why I stayed at that job for so long. It's very base. What I think people really need to understand and hear, and if I could just leave you with one thing right out the gate, is that if you don't make decisions for you, if you don't make the important decisions for yourself, then you give the power of those decisions away to other people. And those people might not be invested in you. They might not have the same priorities in you. It doesn't make them bad or wrong people. They could be doctors, they could be lawyers, they could be your boss, they could be your partner, whoever it is. But if you don't decide what you want and be in charge, that's where the whole thing came from. Be in charge of your life and your decisions, whether it's your health, your money, your business, your family, then you're giving away to me, it's the most powerful thing, right? It's personal choice. And then everyone else gets to make those decisions of what you get to have, the life you get to lead, the business you get to have, the health you get to have. Keep going. It's a rabbit hole.
Erin, how have you personally evolved to come to this clarity about the need for commanding your own personal choice?
Kicking, screaming, crying. I don't know. Unfortunately, I think there's no real easy, what did they say? There's no easy path to enlightenment. 2018, I now fondly call Erin's year of failure. I had a very kind friend rephrase that for me. No, you were just figuring it out. But I went from big fancy corporate to top 10 out of 200 offices and a franchise system to making $11,000. And for those accountants in your audience, $11,000 gross is actually a negative net number, right? What I had to be hit over the head with over and over again was it wasn't what I was doing that was messing me up. It was how I was thinking. So through brutally painful, please don't do it the way I did it, you'll be happier for it. Only learn those types of lessons when you've been hit over the head a few times.
So you were a franchise owner and a top 10 of 200 in that franchise system. At some level, either you had felt like you learned enough or you were ready to take on another opportunity. So you moved away from that franchise system to have a new business.
Mhm.
And what was the way of thinking that the franchise system did not instill in you that then ultimately you determined you must have when you're doing it outside of a franchise system?
Oh my God. For me, the leap was made because I realized the thing that I was great at and that I love doing is the thing that my business does now. The franchise was my, what I call half a leap off a cliff from corporate. I didn't take the full leap off the cliff. I jumped half a cliff into a system, right? That's great. I love business, but it was while I was doing that that I realized what I really love is the puzzle of business. And for all my networking friends, like it would be my turn at the networking group to talk about my business, and my business was working with aging parents, but everyone I knew was like, yeah, we know aging parents, but why are you making money? And so I was helping my small business owner friends with marketing and strategy. It's so funny that the way you asked the question, it wasn't that they didn't give me something I needed. It was because it was more like I didn't know what I didn't know, right? Hence the year of failure. There was nothing wrong with the franchise. There was absolutely nothing wrong with the way that they were functioning and it just no longer fit what I realized was my calling and what I was missing in my life. But to your point of what didn't they teach you, it wasn't them. That was the year of failure. I didn't know what I didn't know. You come out of corporate and you think you're doing so great because you get accolades and you get raises. And then you go into a franchise system and you think you're doing so great because you get accolades and you get raises and bonuses. And then you come out on your own and the bumpers are out of the gutters and the wheels are off the bus. And you realize that you were brilliant on a very narrow path that somebody else created.
So,
Isn't
what
that
was the
insane?
personal choice component that you learned in 2018 to instill?
I had to change how I was thinking. I come out of Chicago, blue collar upbringing, just work harder. But it's if everything's a nail, all you know is a hammer. And the big fancy sales that I was putting together in corporate, the $3 million deals, were happening because of a corporate background, right? But if you walk into a small business entrepreneur networking group with the same swag of corporate sales, people don't want to talk to you. Like people don't want to talk to you. So it wasn't like a work ethic problem and it wasn't a business strategy and tactic problem. It was how I was approaching the whole thing, right? And it was really having a hit. Like, why isn't this working? The way I refer to it now is I'm doing all the work. So why isn't it working? And until I immersed myself almost serendipitously because I felt like I was out of my own ideas with the thing I think I had going for me is I love learning new things. So I went to events and I talked to people and I read books and I found myself in the positive thinking world and met people who showed me there's a slightly different path here you could take.
Erin, 2018, I'm not sure what's up with that year, but that was the year of John failure for sure. That's probably when COVID was cooked up somewhere over in China that same year. That probably all started then too, because that year was just the year that you and I connect on. It just was a horrible year. How did you experience that as a human? You just talked about like connecting with positive people and learning and everything, but in the moment of that failure, bring us back to that moment for a second. And how did you escape from that to then find yourself on the other side and finding yourself?
I don't know that I escaped as much as I crawled out of it. I remember so clearly walking my dog. My boyfriend and I are going on a walk. It's nice out. We're walking the dog and we were in the middle of a baseball field. At the time, she's since passed, but I had an 85-pound black dog that hated people. So we had to take very careful walks where nobody was. We were literally in the middle of a field, which outside of Chicago is not easy to find. And I looked at it and I said, when did it become okay to live this way? I had all this success, and it wasn't even the money. The money was a big problem, but it was the feeling good about yourself. I'm like, when did it become okay to live this way? And I don't think you leap out of those situations. I think you take tiny little steps when the universe gives you a sign. Read this book. Like, I went to an event that summer that I literally had to scrape together the $400 to go. Not to mention it's downtown Chicago, so I'm sure parking was probably twice that.
Yeah.
And that's where I was when I met this person who took a second and explained something to me and opened my eyes to something. And if it's the resiliency, what's interesting and what I still can't explain is that at no time during the horrible bottom of any of it did I ever think I wasn't capable of doing the thing that I wanted to do. I just couldn't figure out how to get there.
So walk us to that moment. What was explained to you?
I'm in this event. It's a money event because, like, at that point, it was very clear that I came to the realization, clearly I'm missing something, right? There is a secret somebody knows. I am missing something.
Yeah.
And so I go to this event, and it was like a money mindset thing. And they start talking. I could explain it to you now, but in the moment, they start talking about things. The way I put it together is I understood the definitions of the words they were using. But if you put them together like that, I don't understand what you're talking about.
Sure.
And there was a woman sitting in front of me. And they were basically talking about how universal law and laws of success and how thoughts become your reality and how you create the world around you. And I always thought that was a physical, tangible thing. And now these people are talking about that being an energetic, emotional thought thing. It's way beyond my frame of reference. But having no money and they had lots of money, I'm thinking maybe there's something I don't know, right? And so I was sitting behind a woman and I noticed she was doing the exercises very quickly and I didn't even understand the directions. So I just started asking her, like, what does this mean? What does that mean? And there was this moment, one of the things she said to me, it was really a question that she posed that was so pivotal. Because again, I come out of corporate where I was doing $3 million deals with Prudential Insurance and John Hancock and MetLife and US Bank, big fancy sales with no hesitation. And what she asked me was, how come you could do it for them and you can't do it for yourself? And I had no answer for that because I didn't know there was a separation between those things. I didn't know that it was so easy to sell the franchise because I didn't create it. It was a tangible external service. It was somebody else's product effectively. But when I became the product, that's when the muckety muck starts to come to the surface that I never even knew was there.
Okay. So you scrape this together, which, by the way, I've always heard that if that conference was free, as an example, you probably wouldn't have gotten as much out of it as all the effort you had to go. I have to go find the whatever that message is here because I've invested so much to get here, right?
I talked the girl at the front desk of the hotel into giving me 2 granola bars because I didn't have money for lunch.
Yeah, amazing. It's amazing when you hear those stories. So you leave there, and how did you find how to do it for yourself? Well, okay, but still from there to here, right? What were some of those steps you took? If you had to give somebody that roadmap and say, here's kind of the roadmap that I followed to start taking charge, right? And being in charge, I should say. What were those steps?
So the way that I did it was I started to be like, okay, if this is something I'm willing to give this a chance. Again, remember, it's so out of the realm of I was a professional juvenile delinquent in the Chicago public school system, right? This is so out of my realm of experience that I was opening my eyes to. And so I started, I would get a book, but I would not only read the book, I would do the exercises in the book. It's the take action piece.
Yeah.
It's the take action piece. You're a Badass at Making Money by Jen Sincero, who, by the way, the coach that held the event was actually her coach. And I met her the day before I went to the event. So I'm like, okay, the stars are aligning here. There's a message here. But you got to do the work. It's not enough to just read the book. And I think people expect big aha moments and the skies open and the bugle sound. It's so much more subtle than that. So I literally took one idea. I took one idea that I got out of that class with the woman in front of me, who, by the way, I ended up working with for 3 years. I took one idea. And it was the idea, the one that jumped, it didn't even matter which I started with. I started with something that hit home to me. It officially called the law of relativity. What meaning are you assigning to things? Things just are. They're not good or bad. They just are. And we attach stories and meaning. So that really hit home to me. So I started to just dig deep on that and look at, where am I making myself bad or wrong instead of just am? Where am I making somebody else right and good instead of just being? And so that really helped me unpack the downward spiral of doom in my head, that I wasn't bad, wrong. I didn't suck. I wasn't a failure because I was in a moment of challenge. I was just having a moment of challenge. Stop assigning meaning to it that ends up perpetuating the problem that you're having. What was interesting to me is I noticed we don't randomly assign positive meanings to things, right? You ever notice that? We only randomly assign negative meanings to things. So I just grabbed onto that one concept as tight as I could, and I tried as best as I could. I reminded myself of it every day. I adopted, oh, isn't that interesting? I became an observer of my behavior and an observer of my thoughts. And I did that, just the one thing, until I got reasonably okay with it. And then I added the next thing. I think humans really mess ourselves up with this all or nothing thinking. Things don't work. It was all too big. It's like trying to get healthy by going from unhealthy, overweight, and sedentary to, okay, I'm going to work out 5 days a week and never eat and only eat these 3 things. It's too big.
Yeah.
Can't do it. So I grabbed one thing that spoke to me, and until I was ready for it to add the next thing.
Love it.
Erin, I'm going to take a shot in the dark.
Uh-oh.
Did it happen to be the Landmark Forum that you went to?
It was not.
Okay.
But I'm very familiar. I don't know if David Nagel, I've read his books. I'm very familiar with Landmark, though, and I know a lot of people who have gotten it's the same concept. Amazing things from Landmark Forum.
Yeah. So what are some of the books that you might recommend if someone wanted to get into the ability to observe their own thoughts and behavior and evaluate them objectively, which is what you're describing, that you got turned on in 2018? That's a thing. I am not my thoughts, and I don't have to believe every thought I have, is what you got. Like, that door opened up. Where can someone begin to access some of this in your experience over the last 6 years?
So there's even been a further shift that I've really enjoyed. The one that I would say I really like to start with, and let's keep it about money, right? I mean, it's a thing. Let's just keep it about money. Kyle Cease, Cease, I think this was like in 2019. He wrote a book called The Illusion of Money. The Illusion of Money. And I like that book because when I went to read the Working with the Law and the Science of Getting Rich, I couldn't read. I wasn't ready for those. I couldn't read them. I didn't understand them. They were way over my head. So I think his first book is, I hope I screw this up, I think that's what it's called. He's a stand-up comedian. He was a stand-up comedian. He was an actor. So he's got a very direct, humorous approach. And I think for me, if you would make this all heavy and serious, I wouldn't do it. You have to have a sense of humor about yourself and about the world around you to get through things, in my opinion, or at least that's worked out for me. So I do The Illusion of Money. If you're way woo or you want to jump way into the metaphysical side, Tasha Silver has It's Not Your Money, which is they're the same exact concepts, but she's very spiritual. And then the other two, I don't know if I'm allowed to swear on your podcast, so I'll just tell you what it is. Amanda Francis wrote a book, Rich as F, right? I don't know. You don't need to put a YouTube warning on it. I love her story because she talks about coming out of nothing. She came out of abject poverty. I've read that book several times. And then one more I'll give you, Denise Duffield Thomas. I think she's out of Australia. Denise Duffield Thomas, Get Rich, Lucky Bitch. And it's so hysterical because my favorite line in her book is, look, this is what I do when I'm working on something. I'm giving it all to you. There's no second book called Get Richer, Lucky Bitchier, right? Those are the people that relate to me. So I've read all of those books that I've mentioned. I've read multiple times. I've done the exercises. They're still part of my routines.
It sounds absolutely pivotal for you in your life and your career. What constitutes your practice today? I guess I'm wondering how much of this work is it that as a result of kind of your awakening to this stuff, I'm wondering, do you focus on these types of things with the entrepreneurs who you work with?
Absolutely. It's very interesting to me because I talk about what I do as working at the intersection where what you need to do meets who you need to be to do it. And it's not the rainbows and puppies and unicorns versions of life coaching. I want you to be happy. That's wonderful. It's the how do I get out of my own way in the moment to do the thing I said I wanted to do. I've named it street level mindset, right? In homage to my upbringing. But I don't market it that much. And yet what's so interesting to me is when I give keynotes, when I give talks, and I talk about in 2018, I made $11,000. And 2 years later, I was making multiple six figures. That's what people want to talk about. When I have my group coaching call, which is all, my whole thing is business strategy. All their questions are mindset questions. How to do something. There's nothing out there right now that you can't Google how to do it. That's a commodity. But how can you help somebody apply the how to their unique situation and their unique goals and their story and their experiences, their strengths, their weaknesses? That's the differentiator.
So thanks for that list of books that are all related to what you used the word as mindset practices.
Mhm.
And you had said one of the difference makers for you was actually doing the exercises that were in the book. I'm curious as to what are some of the daily things that someone can do as an exercise or build into their morning routine that you have found help with mindset?
So I'll give the one that everybody knows, and then I'll give you one I created. It's the gratitude journal, right? What it's so hard to I call it like I'm okay in the light of day, but when you're tired or you're actually asleep and your defenses are down, that's when the doom and gloom thoughts come sneaking back. I call it set your stage. In the morning, I do things where I set my stage. And one of them is a gratitude journal because we forget. We really do forget and we get blind to the amazing abundance that's around us because we're used to seeing what's around us. But the other thing that I do a lot, not just for my business, do this for everything, I asked myself, and I write it all out, and sometimes I write the same thing day after day, depends on what I'm working on. I'll write out, what do I want? What do I want? Not like ultimately, but like right now, what do I want? And that could be a feeling, that could be a tangible outcome, that could be that you have a family event coming up and you ain't looking forward to all of these people. What do I want? And then I ask myself, you got to get clear. Because one of the reasons people don't get to where they want to go is they have no idea where they're going. And then there's 3 follow-up questions. What do I need to do? What do I need to do? Because none of it matters if you don't take the action. And remember, we already said humans get real all or nothing. What do I need to do today that'll move me towards it? Who do I need to be? Who do I need to be to get the thing I want? Maybe I need to be more forgiving. Most of the time, the thing I need to be is braver. 90% of the time, the thing I need to be is more forgiving and braver. And then the last question is, what do I need to believe? I need to believe that it's possible. I need to believe that I'm worth it. I need to believe that it's possible for me. So I do that exercise a lot, right? The 4 questions what do I want? And then what do I need to do? Who do I need to be? And what do I need to believe in order to make that happen?
Yeah. It's interesting. We talk about this a good amount. One of the benefit, and you have your podcast and we have this podcast, one of the benefits is we get to read a book every week and talking to folks like yourself, and we get to sharpen our saw. And over that period of time, in our 4th season, going on 5 here pretty soon, one of the secrets of success we just hear over and over again is the power of journaling and asking yourself the right questions repeatedly. Rich and I had a guest, John Mitchell, who teaches the science of success at University of Austin, Texas. And Rich and I now have a daily visualization that we actually read that actually answers a lot of these questions. What do I want? What do I need to do? Who do I need to be? And what do I need to become? It's actually in that daily visualization that we refresh every quarter and read to ourselves. If you had told me 10 years ago, hey, John, you need to have a daily visualization, I'd be like, come
You
on.
would have told me 5 years ago.
Really? Come on, right? Yeah, exactly. Same for me 5 years ago. If you had told me every day you should start with a blank sheet of paper and say, what are you grateful for? I'd be like, come on, I don't need to do that. I think the 3 of us subscribe to this. And inevitably, when we do talk to people that have achieved different levels of success, they all come back to the same thing. And
Right?
so talk to the entrepreneurs that are listening to this right now that do not do that do not ask themselves these questions, that do not write down and journal their thoughts and ask themselves the right questions. Speak to them directly and tell them why it's essential.
I guess the first question I would ask is, why are you prolonging your suffering? Why are you prolonging your suffering? Isn't it interesting? I'm going to give an analogy here. I was in the franchise system for 6 years, and I was doing so well that the franchise owner would hire me to train new franchise. And so people would come over from all over the country, come to Chicago, and I would show them how I was running my system. I couldn't believe, I was absolutely shocked at how many people paid all this money to buy a franchise system, flew to Chicago to spend the week with me, and then spent the week telling me how they were going to do it differently and how the franchise was wrong. You can run your business however you want, but why? Why would you buy the franchise system if you weren't going to believe it? And so, to your point, right, if this many people are telling you that this is not just a key, but the key, not just a key, not just a way, but the way, why are you prolonging your suffering? Because none of us are saying this is the exact way you have to do it. My morning routine has iterated tremendously, depending on what I've got going on, depending on what I've learned. So nobody's telling you it only works this one perfect way. You got to make it right for you. But every single person is saying it has to happen in some way. So why are you prolonging your suffering? Why, if you say you want this thing and someone is saying this is exactly how to get that thing, what are you waiting for? Because it's uncomfortable, because it's scary, because it's hard, because it's different. What's harder? Doing this scary, weird, uncomfortable thing by yourself where no one sees you, or banging your head against the wall, not making any money and not living the life you want? Pick your heart. Which one's harder?
Yeah, don't prolong your suffering. I love that way. That's very direct and in their face for sure. And at the end of the day, it's true. And when I define my life plan, I never had a life plan. When I define my life plan, what I want to achieve, have direction and clarity, and wake up every day thinking about it. What John Mitchell talks about, the gentleman I mentioned earlier, is that 95% of our daily actions are subconscious. They're already pre-programmed.
Right.
And so if 95% is pre-programmed and you haven't programmed it, guess what? You're spending 95% of your direction just doing aimlessly, walking around trying to figure out what's going on and why it's not working. So love that. Just a quick shift of gears here. I know that, for example, you run a lead generation masterclass. And I know you talk a lot about the way to grow your business is get more leads, get more conversations, and get more growth. Can you give us just a little bit of a commercial or any tips or tricks on that aspect of why that's so important to business growth for entrepreneurs?
Yeah, absolutely. Because so by definition, and people draw the line in different places, but for the sake of this conversation, marketing are the things that you do, the actions that you take to create awareness that you have a business. Sales is the mutually agreed upon conversation that you enter into to talk about exchanging money for services. You notice I started that off with mutually agreed upon conversation. DMing people randomly in the LinkedIn chat is not a sales conversation. So if marketing is everything that you do to create awareness and sales is talking about working with somebody, the bridge to get from engaging in your marketing into sales conversations is intentional lead generation. And you can't jump steps when going with that example, because I seem to be inundated with it now. Throwing a effective sales page in a LinkedIn DM the second somebody accepts your request is like asking the lady you met at the bar to marry you before you bought her a drink. No one's ready for this. Intentional lead generation is the bridge. It's the journey. It's the path to get from marketing to a sales conversation so that people can continue to self-select along the way based on the way you engage with them, so that by the time you have a sales conversation, it's really just a confirmation conversation, not a convincing conversation, because nobody likes that to be on either side of that conversation. And there's simple, it doesn't have to be hard. It doesn't have to be complicated. It doesn't even have to be scary or uncomfortable. But there's a path you can lay out for yourself. And I think one of the mistakes people make is it's got to be strategy over tactics every time. Stop trying to solve every problem in your business with a marketing tactic. Marketing tactics are the last thing you decide, not the first thing you decide. The just do this one thing. Yeah, that's not how that works.
Love it.
Ask me how I really feel.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I do think there is a lot of confusion between marketing strategy and tactics and marketing versus sales and what exactly are they and how you're measuring and tracking what is happening and all those kinds of things that I think is great. And so, Erin, how do entrepreneurs get more, learn more, connect with you?
Make it real easy. All you need to do is go to conqueryourbusiness.com. Everything's there. The resources are there. The podcast is there. The Connect with Erin is there. The email, you can email me from there. It's all in one place for you to make life easy. conqueryourbusiness.com.
Thanks for joining us today. Fantastic.
Thank you so much for having me.
Stay tuned as John and Rich unpack today's conversation.
John, I'm glad you asked that last question about the marketing end. I took a note on her answer and really love this idea of people self-selecting along the way. So when a sales conversation comes up, it's really a confirmation conversation. And when we think about sales, that's really what sales should be. Sales is about having a conversation, understanding what the problem is of the person who's being served, and then just simply putting a proposal together that solves that problem in the way they want it solved. There should be no surprises at the point of the proposal. The proposal is just confirming all the stuff we just talked about that you said you had a problem with that I felt like we could help you with in the way that you wanted to be helped. Like, it's not a sales conversation. It's a confirmation conversation.
Yeah. And it's also, when you think about the marketing awareness part of it, part of your job is to make sure you're addressing that addressable market. If you're in the business of painting homes, you shouldn't be marketing to teenagers, for lack of a better example, right? But how do you bridge it so you're also trying to get the people that fit exactly your niche who are self-selecting themselves out, like you say? It's not easy. And what ends up happening, I think, when she talked about tactics over strategy as opposed to strategy over tactics, is people just like to throw spaghetti up against the wall. And then they wonder why they're not getting as much business or those kinds of things. Whereas you really have a good strategy, the tactics should follow second. So I love that approach of it. And she said something about intentional lead generation, right?
Mm.
And being very intentional that you're trying to generate the right leads that self-select themselves out. So when you do get to the sales process, you have a much higher success rate because people, to your point, are ready for it. To me,
By the way, I just want to double down on what you said. You said self-select out, and I didn't hear that in what she said, but I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
That selection process in the initial conversation is as much about allowing people to select out that they don't identify with the audience that your product or service serves, as much as it is that they do identify it. We don't want to force what we have to offer on people that it doesn't actually help.
Correct.
So to set up that intentional process to both have people select out and select in,
Yep.
I think is an important underline from what you just said.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And you're right. I didn't hear her say that specifically. So if that's not her viewpoint, I apologize. It was more of just my way of thinking through it.
Agreed.
Rich, this overriding thought of things just are. I may have mentioned this before, but I had an experience with an entrepreneur that I'm coaching. And the comment was, business is stressful. That's just what it is. And I'm like, it is? I was like, what do you mean by that? Like, why is it just always stressful? And the reality is that is what the story was. The story was business is stressful. But things just are. Business is just business. You make it stressful by the way you're processing what is going on, right? And for me, the lesson of this conversation is that things just are. And bad things happen, unfortunately. Things happen. Death happens. Businesses fail. People get fired. These things happen. They happen to me. They happen to you. But how we process it and the questions we're asking ourselves are so critically important. And I do find over and over again, entrepreneurs do exactly what I did, is I just started running. And I was running and I was running and I thought I was heading in the right direction. And I ended up falling right off the cliff to then be like, oh my gosh, what was I doing? And now I don't just run aimlessly. I have patient ambition. I think more. I ask myself more questions. And a lot of that result is this podcast. It's from listening from people like Erin or Dr. Julie Bell, who said just take a piece of paper and write for 20 minutes a day, to John Mitchell and this visual, and just Think and Grow Rich and the episode we did on that and the book review. A lot of it has come. My thinking has progressed significantly. And I get validation points like the conversation we had with Erin that, yeah, it is the questions we ask. It's so critical, but yet still, I'd say 90% of entrepreneurs don't do it. And it frustrates me.
There's the Viktor Frankl from Man's Search for Meaning, and he was the original one that came up with the philosophy of there's a stimulus and a response, and to separate those two things. And as the story goes, and I'm sure it's truth, not story, that his family he was in a Nazi concentration camp. His family was killed, horribly tortured. And what he was left with, how he stayed sane himself, was he said, you can do anything you want to me, but you can't make me cry. So he was declaring, you can make any event happen, but you can't control my reaction. I get to control my reaction. And in that, he separated stimulus from response. And in between those two is where there's a moment of choice. Because there's a big difference between a response and a reaction. The response is almost a knee jerk. It's impulsive. It's based on your hardwiring, childhood upbringing. That's the response or the reaction. The response is, okay, now I've created a pause and I'm going to select how I want to respond next. It's interesting because that's very physical in how he went about it. There's also this whole other side that you're talking about, that Erin's talking about, where it's like everything is just there's just a fact that something happened. What happened? Because everything else outside of the fact of what happened is just our story. So while we know that it's all a story that we tell ourselves, we might as well tell ourselves an empowering story. One that makes us make good decisions, one that makes us feel good about what we're doing and who we are, not as an exception to having good introspection and changing when we need to, but creating a story that makes us make good decisions next.
Yeah, and I think that's where her tagline is. We didn't talk about it enough, but just to bring it back full circle is be in charge. Take action, get results. A lot of people, though, take action and get results. They don't be in charge first. They skip that step. And she started off right off the bat. I asked her, what is the one thing, right? Is if you do not make decisions for you, you give the power to others. They're in charge. You take action and the results come, but they may not be your results. They may not be the results you wanted. They may not be positive results. They may be positive results, but they're not yours, or there's an issue. It's almost like you need the three legs of the stool. You have to be in charge of yourself and what you want to achieve in life and how you process different things that happen in life to you and or others, right? You have to really be in charge of that direction, then take action that connects to the plan that you have in place and what you want, who you want to be and where you want to go, all the other questions that she asked, right? And then you'll get the results you really want. That is power.
And she said many people don't achieve what they want in life because they don't know what they want. And when she was talking about what you're referencing there and that personal choice, I love her very first question is, what do I want? Because if we're not clear on what we actually want, how are we going to advocate for ourselves to get what we want? It was interesting many years ago. I think I've told you this before, John, many years ago, before getting in that Leading from the Inside Out course, someone asked me, what do you want out of life? And my answer was like, as a parent, here's who I want to be. As an employee, here's who I want to be. As someone who's creative. And it was, as a son, here's who I want to be. And so I said, take all that away. Everything you just said is in regard to who you look like for other people. Take all that away. Don't talk about somebody else in this. What do you want? And I had no idea.
Yeah.
And it was an odd, empty moment to realize in that moment, and this was probably, 13, 14 years ago, that I was like, I am not in touch with my own needs irrelevant of others.
Wow. Rich, at the risk of oversharing, we have an event coming up in September, the Entrepreneurs United Empowerment Experience. And we've had incredible programming last year in Austin. And we're talking about the programming for this year in Charleston. You and I had a call offline yesterday about the programming and what do entrepreneurs really want? What do they really need? And the entrepreneurs that come to this event, ranging from $5 million businesses to $1 billion businesses, but they all need the same question to be asked potentially of them, which is the question you just asked. Inevitably, you ask an entrepreneur that question, it's, I want to be there for my kids. I want to be a good husband or wife. I want to, be there for my aging parents. I want to, but what about you? Oh, I want to be a good CEO for my business. No, you.
Yes.
That might be what we cover in Charleston in September, because I think that's really something that can be really powerful with people sitting around a table and having that conversation, because I think it's really important for people to get centered. And as Erin says, be in charge.
And then make personal choice.